You ever watch the Clone Wars and realize halfway through that the Jedi might be the worst people to lead a war? Like not even a little bad. Like full-on strategy challenged, space monks making every mistake possible with total confidence. It's like giving philosophy majors laser swords and telling them to run a military. What could possibly go wrong, right? They go from sitting in temples meditating about peace to jumping into tanks and barking orders like they've been doing this for decades. Meanwhile, clones are dying, planets are burning, and the Jedi are standing around debating moral clarity while missiles fly past their heads. It's wild. It's like watching your guidance counselor try to lead a SWAT team. And don't even get me started on Anakin. The red flags weren't just there, they were flashing. In neon, with sirens. And the council just nodded, like, yeah, let's promote this emotionally unstable chosen one, who keeps violating the Jedi code, and see what happens. Spoiler alert, he becomes Darth Vader. Who could have guessed? The entire order gets played like a fiddle by a guy with unlimited power and the world's creepiest voice. Palpatine didn't even try to hide it. He was sitting like 10 feet from them the whole time, cackling in plain sight, and they still went. Yes, Chancellor, good call, we'll kill those separatists now. Genius level stuff. But the thing is, underneath all the mistakes and facepalm moments, there's something kind of tragic about it. The Jedi weren't evil. They weren't trying to mess things up. They just genuinely didn't know how far off course they'd gone until the whole thing collapsed around them. In this video, we're breaking down how the Clone Wars exposed the Jedi as completely out of their depth, why their noble ideals weren't enough, and how their failure didn't just cost them their lives, it changed the entire fate of the galaxy forever. So here's the thing that's always kind of weird when you actually stop and think about it. The Jedi were monks, philosophers, peacekeepers, and yet somehow they got promoted overnight to generals leading a galactic army of clones into full-blown war. How did that happen? Who signed off on that? Did nobody in the room go, hey, maybe letting pacifists command military operations isn't the brightest idea? What's wild is how easily they just went along with it. Like Yoda's sitting there in his little hover chair, nodding like this is totally normal. Meanwhile, Obi-Wan's suddenly a war hero, and Anakin's getting medals for blowing stuff up. The Jedi didn't just accept the war, they embraced it. Like a bunch of teenagers handed a flamethrower and told to guard the fireworks. And it wasn't just 1 or 2 battles either. These guys were leading campaigns, commanding troops, laying siege to cities. You'd think someone would pause and go, hey, this kind of goes against our whole no attachments, no violence, no emotions thing. But nope. Apparently the Jedi code had an asterisk next to it that said, asterisk, unless there's a cool helmet involved. The Clone Wars took the Jedi's whole identity and turned it inside out, and they didn't even blink. They traded philosophy for strategy, robes for armor, diplomacy for destruction. And the scary part is, most of them thought they were still doing the right thing, which is, honestly, even more terrifying. So what happened? How did the wisest beings in the galaxy fall for the biggest setup in galactic history? And why didn't they see the trap until it was already too late? Because from the outside looking in, the Clone Wars didn't just challenge the Jedi Order, it exposed every crack in its foundation. Alright, let's just say it. The Jedi were absolutely clueless. They were fighting a war, using soldiers grown in secret by a bounty hunter who worked for a Sith Lord. And not one of them connected the dots. Not even Yoda, not even Mace Windu. They had all the evidence sitting right in front of them and still somehow went, yeah, this seems fine. And don't forget, they were constantly being manipulated by Palpatine, openly, in broad daylight. This guy was literally giving them orders from the Chancellor's office while secretly orchestrating the whole war. And they still brought him tea and called him my lord. I mean, come on. How many red flags do you need before someone goes, hey, maybe this dude in the black robes is up to something shady? They also ignored Anakin's issues like it was a team sport. This guy was having nightmares about his wife dying, breaking Jedi rules left and right, slicing people in half out of pure rage. And the Council's response was basically, let's keep putting him in charge of missions and hope he doesn't go full meltdown. It's actually kind of heartbreaking when you really sit with it. The Jedi weren't evil, they weren't malicious, they were just lost, blinded by their own ideals and traditions, trying to navigate a war they never asked for, and slowly unraveling in the process. Watching them collapse wasn't satisfying, it was tragic. They started with the best of intentions. They wanted peace, they wanted justice, but their refusal to adapt, their rigid interpretation of the code, and their fear of change turned them into something unrecognizable. They stopped listening, they stopped feeling, and in doing that, they stopped seeing the truth. You can feel it in scenes with characters like Luminara Unduli, so cold and detached, talking about clone deaths like they were numbers on a spreadsheet, or Ki-Adi-Mundi dismissing legitimate concerns like they were distractions. These weren't villains. They were people who lost touch with what made the Jedi worth following in the first place. Even Ahsoka, one of the brightest lights in the Order, had to walk away to preserve her soul. That says everything. When the Jedi's best and most compassionate member can't trust the system anymore, the system is already broken beyond repair. And for Anakin, that betrayal became the final crack in his already fragile foundation. And yet, in the middle of all that chaos and failure, the Jedi still had flashes of brilliance. They weren't totally lost. Not all the time. You'd see it in those quiet moments, when they stopped being generals, and remembered how to be guardians, defenders, mentors. Think about Obi-Wan, standing alone against Maul and Savage, protecting innocence. Not for glory, but because it was right. Or Plo Koon rescuing clone troopers from death, even when he didn't have to. That wasn't strategy. That was compassion. The kind the Jedi was supposed to embody. And then there was Ahsoka, walking away from the Order. Not in anger, but in clarity. She chose to live by the Jedi values, even when the Council wouldn't. That's power, not force power, but moral power. And honestly, that made her more of a Jedi than most of the Council ever was. Even Yoda, toward the end, started to understand the mistake when he went on that journey across the galaxy, seeking deeper knowledge of the Force. You could feel him trying to recover what was lost. There was wisdom in that, a spark of humility. Like the Order was finally realizing it didn't have all the answers. So maybe that's what makes the tragedy hit so hard. Because for every mistake, every fumble, every failure, there was still something noble underneath. Something worth saving. Something that deserved a second chance, even if it never got one. Here's the thing. The Jedi didn't have to stay broken. They could have changed. They could have evolved. They had the tools. They had the knowledge. They just didn't use them in time. But the pieces for something better were always there, waiting to be reassembled. Characters like Ahsoka, Kanan, and even Luke show us what the Jedi could be without all the rigid dogma. They show us Jedi who care deeply, who listen, who feel, and who understand that peace doesn't come from denying emotion, but from understanding it. That's the future the galaxy needed, not a clone of the past. The Clone Wars tore everything down, but it also revealed what could be rebuilt. A new kind of Jedi, one that values people over politics, presence over power. And honestly, that idea is still powerful, even now, because it means the story isn't over. The Jedi legacy wasn't erased. It just needed a hard reset. Every time we see someone like Grogu, like Rey, like Cal Kestis, trying to figure out what being a Jedi even means, it feels like that reset might finally be happening. It's messy, it's uncertain, but it's real. And it's rooted in the idea that maybe, just maybe, the Jedi can rise again by learning from their failures. So, no, the Clone Wars didn't kill the Jedi forever. It just forced them to look in the mirror and decide what kind of guardians they really wanted to be. In the end, the Clone Wars didn't just expose the flaws in the Jedi, it magnified them, amplified them, until they were too big to ignore. The Jedi fell, not because of the Sith, not because of Order 66, but because they lost themselves long before the first shot was ever fired. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy my videos, please consider looking at my pinned comment and checking out the links for my Amazon storefront. It contains my favorite Legos, my gear in which I make videos, and comics that I read on a daily basis. I update it constantly, so please, take a moment and click on the link. On top of that, check out my second channel, Critical Analysis Hub Plus, and my third channel, Critical Analysis Hub XP. Just one click would go on a long way in supporting my channels and future in YouTube.